Greetings. I've been holding off on doing the Washington video because I was like, well, they're going to hire a coach, so I'll just wait till they hire a coach. Well, I got to get into the second round teams that got eliminated, so apparently not. Uh, they have not yet named a coach, but because I'm posting this video now, the coach will be named really, really quickly. Probably while I'm uploading the video. But whether it's Gallant, whether it's Laviolette, whether it's Babcock, my vote would go to Peter Laviolette personally. But whoever they go with, the Washington Capitals have an interesting decision to make when it comes to coach and how they're going to perceive things moving forward. For GM Brian McClellan, the question becomes one of, okay, so you've lost in round one twice now. You lost last year to the Carolina Hurricanes. This year you lose to the Islanders in 5. The Islanders came out and they played a smothering style that the Capitals couldn't fight their way through. Ovechkin had a rough time, and then there's this whole, oh, they didn't want to be there, oh, they didn't take it seriously. That's buckus. That's not a thing. Players leaving their families to go play hockey in a bubble, they are taking it seriously. Otherwise, you're telling your wife and kids, oh, yeah, we weren't home, but we really didn't want to be there either. So, anyways, it doesn't work for me. So with the Capitals, the question becomes one of, okay, so now they've lost twice in a row in the first round. So are we looking at a Washington Capitals team that is a one and done with the Stanley Cup? Before you answer yes, I know almost everybody's saying yes. The reality is there's been teams in history that look like they're done winning Stanley Cups, and then they managed to pull another one out. The Detroit Red Wings did that. I would argue the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2017. Early in that season, it looked like there was no chance of them repeating, and then they did. The Oilers in 1990 were a huge surprise to add another Stanley Cup ring after Gretzky had left. Things had kind of changed, and they weren't nearly as good during the regular season in 89-90 either as previous Oilers teams. So I'm not willing to write off the Capitals just yet. The thing with the Capitals is they are an older team in a league that keeps getting younger. And when I say older, I mean their key guys. Because whenever I talk about teams being older and younger, people go, oh, actually, if you look at the average age. Okay, well, I'm talking about the core guys here for Washington. The guys they need to be performing at that level in order for them to win another championship. And it starts with Ovechkin, who's 34 years of age. His motivation every year to get 50 goals is impressive. Every year, 50 goals, pretty much you can set your clock to it, that he will hit 50 goals. And I will be very surprised if he doesn't next season. But the reality is, at some point, he's either going to decide to retire, because that's how aging works, or eventually, maybe he goes home, plays in KHL for a year or two. And whether that happens at the end of this contract or whenever it happens, that's your key question. Now, for Brian McClellan, he already has to be asking the question, how much is Ovechkin worth next year? Are we building towards being a contender? And what's in our best interests moving forward? The Capitals are a very good regular season team that in the postseason tends to let their fans down. If not for that 2018 Stanley Cup, just go back to 2018. If they had lost that round 2 against Pittsburgh, we'd be having a whole different conversation about how they'd never won and Ovechkin's never won. And Ovechkin wouldn't have lost that tag of being a guy who doesn't perform in the playoffs. And so that's a massive difference, that one overtime game changed the whole course of things for the Washington Capitals. Because that gave them, I think, the confidence and the ability to win a Stanley Cup that year by knocking out Pittsburgh. So the Ovechkin question is going to be out there until he either signs an extension or silences it by saying, I'm not talking about my contract till the year's up. Whatever he does, right? That's what the whole team is going to revolve around. Kuznetsov and Wilson are not amongst the older players. They are still in their primes, obviously, and I think Wilson is starting to really hit his prime as a scorer. Jacob Vrana, same thing. Jacob Vrana, young, in his prime. But Backstrom and Oshie are both in their 30s as well, 32 and 33 respectively. And Oshie's contract at some point is going to look a little less friendly towards the Capitals than it does right now. I don't think it's a problem right now, but it will be. And what the Capitals do when that happens, which you have to think is coming over the next year or two, that'll be interesting to see what happens then. And then, of course, Eller, who's 31 years of age as well, Eller has proven that he can jump into the top six. If Backstrom gets hurt, if something happens, he can jump into the top six and it doesn't hurt them too much. And then there's Connor McMichael. So while I'm talking about players being long in the tooth, Connor McMichael, who looks like a steal out of the draft for them, if he does turn out to be a steal, if he can jump into the lineup next season, that would be a huge boost for a team that, yeah, they look older when you look at their top six. And if McMichael can jump in, push Oshie down out of the top six, maybe onto the third line with Eller, give them a more balanced scoring attack and three lines that can really score, that could be to their benefit. Or even McMichael on a third line with Eller, learning the game and then jumping into a top six role later in the season. That could be the huge question mark around them, other than coaching. Who's going to coach the team and then what's going to happen from there? Their top four on the blue line, it's thin. Kempny, Carlson, Orlov, Jensen currently look like that would be your top four. Without Dylan and Gudas, who are both going to unrestricted free agency. Maybe they bring back Brendan Dillon. Maybe they don't. I don't think Gudas is going to come back and play for Washington, but their depth on the blue line definitely takes a hit. So that's a question mark for Washington, where they do have $8.9 million in cap space for next season. And if they're not going to bring back any of their UFAs, then they can definitely spend a little bit of money, go out and pick up a defenseman. Like maybe Tanev works for them. If Chris Tanev doesn't stay in Vancouver, maybe he ends up working for the Capitals. He's not overly old. He's not in his mid to late 30s. Not as old as people might think he is when you look at how he plays the game and it feels like he's been around forever. But maybe he works. Somebody like that. A solid defensive defenseman and somebody who can play, a decent amount of minutes without any kind of trouble. And this year for Vancouver, Tanev didn't miss a game. So that's important too, that Tanev showed that he can go a season without an injury, because injuries have been really the name of the game with Chris Tanev. But their goaltending should be solid with Samsonov and likely Vanacek as the backup, meaning Phoenix Copley got passed by another goaltender. Copley's still there as potentially being the backup, but I think it'll be Samsonov and Vanacek. And, there's no reason to think that necessarily drops them down in the standings, because we watched as the Columbus Blue Jackets went to Korpisalo and Merzlikins. Merzlikins didn't have a minute of time in the NHL before the season, and Korpisalo had been a backup, and it worked. So Samsonov, who is considered to be one of the best young goaltenders in the game, and Vanacek, who isn't on that same level, but he's still considered to be an NHL-level goaltender, they're fine. Their goaltending is fine, and it's cheap, and that's important because they're going to be trying to, I would think, improve that blue line. The Capitals got pushed around a bit by the Islanders. When they lost that 1-5, they didn't have whatever it was they had in 2018. And it's a matter of Brian McClellan saying, can we get back to that, or is that done? UFAs, Kovalchuk, 37 years of age. Kovalchuk, it did not work. It just did not work. And I don't see any reason for the Capitals to even entertain the idea of bringing Kovalchuk back. I think there's a greater chance he ends up back in Montreal, to be honest. So Kovalchuk's out. Dylan and Gudas are likely one or the other out. I would think Dylan maybe they bring him back, but if they bring him back, that would take away from their $8.9 million in cap space and maybe hurt their ability to bring somebody else in, unless they can get rid of some money somewhere else on the roster. And of course Holtby, who's 30 years of age, so he's still young enough that a team could sign him to a 5-year contract and probably get full value from it. But I don't know that 5-year contract is going to come from the Capitals. I think they're perfectly fine going to Samsonov, saving the money that they'd spent on Holtby, which you would have to think would eat well over 50% of this $8.9 million that they have under the cap. And, they move forward from there. But somebody will offer Holtby a decent amount of money, and he will be an upgrade to somebody's goaltending somewhere. May very well be Calgary. Calgary might be the best fit for Holtby, but again, we'll see what happens. I'm thinking a 5-year contract for him. Even in a situation where the cap is flat and there's a lot of economic uncertainty, he's going to make some money. And I understand he didn't have a great year this year statistically, but he's still Braden Holtby. He's still got a Vezina trophy to his name. Somebody's going to offer him money. Restricted free agents are Boyd and Siegenthaler. which means they are going to be eating into this cap space a bit, but only by about $1.5 million. So they'll still have roughly $6-7 million to try to keep things above board and try to stay in the mix. But the Capitals definitely, to me, it looks like are potentially trending down next season. I say that, and yet usually during regular seasons they're pretty darn good. It's the postseason that's become their problem again. They have the number 25 pick in this year's draft, and they have number 80. They don't have a second-round draft pick. That went to Detroit, and so they just have 2 picks in the first 3 rounds, which is not that unusual for teams that have been contenders for a while, that they will mortgage draft picks here and there in order to try to make things better. And or unless you're Vancouver, Benning just mortgages draft picks because sure, you want more draft picks, sure. And thankfully he's able to make other moves to make up for it, but that's without them being a contender at the time. The Capitals, they've got their Stanley Cup ring from 2018. Do they get another one in 2021? My guess would be probably not. My feeling is that yes, this Stanley Cup Finals patch from 2018, this is about as good as it gets for the Capitals, but there's still enough of the core here. There's enough good players here. You've got Carlson, who's been an excellent defenseman for them for a very long time. Ovechkin, the best goal scorer in the history of the game. That's a debate that we have regularly, and I think he's kind of proven that he is the best goal scorer in the history of the game. And then you've got Backstrom, Kuznetsov down the middle. It's a formidable lineup as long as you can surround them with the right players. So is Brian McClellan going to be able to do that? Does Peter Laviolette, Gerard Gallant, or Mike Babcock lead them back to the promised land in 2021? And if Babcock became the coach and they won the Stanley Cup next year, would that not be the most Toronto Maple Leafs thing to happen ever? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.